In Dragon Age the Veilguard, the combat is actually fun. At least, that's what Mark Darrah had to say, a former Bioware alum who you may know from basically being there kind of forever. He has a long and storied history with Bioware, stretching all the way back to Baldur's Gate, the second game Bioware ever made. He was also the executive producer on Dragon Age Origins, so no shortage of bona fides there. After leaving Bioware in 2020 to retire, he came back to consult on Dragon Age the Veilguard in 2023. His quote was exactly, "Uncharitably, previous Dragon Age games got to the realm of combat wasn't too bad. In this game, the combat's actually fun, but it does keep that thread that's always been there. You have to focus on Rook, on your character, but still have that control and character coming into the combat experience from other people in your party." Now, of course, that combat has caused a bit of a stir when you say that every other game's combat wasn't that good. So I'll just go ahead and double down and say every other Dragon Age game except for Dragon Age Origins, I didn't really enjoy the combat. I thought that Dragon Age 2 went too much into it just changed too much from Dragon Age Origins, and then Dragon Age Inquisition felt like it was trying to be too many things at once. So I guess I'm in agreement here, although the jury is still out on what exactly Dragon Age Veilguard's combat's going to be like. But we got a ton of new information on how it's going to play out. And what we got is actually kind of making me feel a little bit better about the game and what we're going to get in fall of 2024. But this isn't about Mark Darrah, and it's not even about me and my opinion. Let's jump into the details we have so far about the combat in Dragon Age the Veilguard. We now have a clearer picture than ever before on what to expect from the upcoming RPG's combat. In an article with Games Informer, game director Corrine Bush talked about how in combat every action is going to be important. Not just your skills and attack combos, but also your blocks and dodges. It sounds like it'll even have animation canceling, with the use of dashing out of harm's way to continue your attacks from a safer angle. Or perhaps, for some classes, to parry or throw up a magic shield to guard. And despite what you may have heard, that does not mean that Dragon Age is completely and utterly abandoning all RPG systems and every kind of tactical combat. In fact, we'll get into more of that in a little bit. Each player class will have a fast attack and a heavy attack, 3 active abilities and an ultimate ability, and of course your companions, who will each have 3 abilities of their own. It also sounds like some attacks are going to be chargeable, so I'm here kind of hoping that I'll be able to charge up a few devastating mage spells. You'll also be able to set up double weapon loadouts to swap in combat, more in line with Dragon Age Origins than, say, Inquisition, but the way they're doing it in Veilguard sounds altogether more involved. We saw fire from the hip range attacks from the rogue in the gameplay video with a rechargeable set of 8 arrows, but the example given for mages is even more interesting, with the ability to get 3 stacks of an arcane bomb on a character before switching to magical daggers for a few quick light attacks and then back to the staff to explode said bomb. I'm usually not a fan of weapon swapping in general in games because it normally comes across as being very gimmicky. It also doesn't seem to fit many fantasy tropes, as it's not really something you see over and over again where you have your heroes swapping out their weapons mid-combat. There are exceptions, of course, but it's just not the norm. So I'm kind of hoping with this weapon swapping, it's a little bit more like Origins, where it's perfectly valid to just have a single set of weapons. And it kind of sounds like it might be from the article in Games Informer, which suggests that you can get what you want out of the new combat system. You might be able just to face roll your way through the game if you want to, which is a perfectly valid way to play a game, and it's how I played Dragon Age Origins the first time around, Dragon Age 2 the first time around, and Inquisition the first time around. I think I played it on either the lowest difficulty on normal difficulty. But that's probably only going to work on those lower difficulties. You will also be able to min-max your abilities, take advantage of elemental vulnerabilities, build yourself and your companions to work in synergy with each other, and strategize your combinations, all while pausing frequently to direct them on what targets to attack and how. I know there's been a lot of concern here with a lack of strategy in the game, that it's going to be too action combat-y. And I'm happy to hear this part about synergizing your abilities and building your characters not just as a solo character, but building your characters with the idea of your companions in mind and how you will synergize with them. as well as the frequent talk of pausing the game to issue commands to your companions to say what attacks you want to use and what targets you want them to do. And all that said, I probably still will not play Nightmare because I think that Nightmare would just kick my ass. I've tried hard in a couple other Dragon Age games, and that's enough for me. That is enough difficulty for me and my brain. But there is one concern I have here from this article, and I haven't seen it really countered anywhere else. My biggest concern is one I hope is just a misread on my part, where they say that Bush said each character will play the same way, regardless of class, using light attacks, heavy attacks, and abilities with the same buttons. A charitable interpretation of this just means the obvious. You're not going to have just light attacks for a rogue, for example, but light and heavy attacks as well, just like a fighter or just like a mage. That's really not different from any other Dragon Age game. A less charitable take on this would be that the game is leaning too much into the action of your single character, that they want other characters like Mage to feel active in the center of it all. What with their dodges and everything like that. Part of the appeal of having companions with different roles is that, well, they do different things. I'm hoping this doesn't mean a Mage Rook with a fighter companion is going to be smack dab in the middle, tanking it out with their fighter companion, but instead can hang back a bit and just kind of throw out devastating spells. Class roles are important in an RPG like this, and it will be disappointing if they've been homogenized too much, especially with how cool some of them sound. We'll just have to see, but maybe we'll get some kind of gameplay of another class that is not the rogue, so we can actually see how different playstyles work in Dragon Age the Veilguard before we get it at launch. That would be ideal, I think. There will be 3 main classes to pick from, each with 3 specializations, making for 9 total. And I'm already struggling deeply with which warrior subclass and specialization I want to go with, because 2 of them sound really freaking cool. But that might actually work out. More of that in just a sec. But first, let's start with the rogue, since that's the one we've actually seen, although only at level 1. Rogues will have the Duelist, Saboteur, and Veil Jumper. The first 2 by name seem to lean toward a melee specialist and trap layer, while the third is likely going to involve magic in some way, given, well, the Veil. Although a lot of this is still just speculation, so I could be and probably am completely wrong. Then we go over to the Mage, which disappointed every Twisted Evil Run RPG player because you can't use blood magic. But there might be a silver lining because we got the names for it. We'll have the Evoker, the Spellblade, and the Death Caller. As a warrior, you'll get to choose between Slayer, Reaper, and Champion. Like I was saying, I'm kind of torn between Slayer and Reaper, with options potentially for a big-ass weapon, as well as lifestealing as a Reaper. But this is where it gets really interesting, because from the sound of it, I might be able to make some interesting choices between those 2. In the images of the skill trees we've seen, you're not just following a linear path directly into one specialization or another. The example here of a warrior shows you starting in the center and branching out, and they seemingly do so toward all 3 specializations to different degrees, with the primary focus on Slayer. You'll be able to take your class to level 50 along the way, filling out this deep skill web that should be intimately familiar to anyone who played another great RPG, Final Fantasy X. Right down to the use of different bubbles on the web, either relating to large upgrades like skills or small upgrades like a few stat points, passives, and actives. It will be interesting to see just how much this allows you to kind of create your own role even beyond specialization once we actually get our hands on the game and the guides start flowing. One thing we do know is that each specialization will have its own unique ultimate ability, but they don't want you waiting until the game is already over to feel like you become your specialization. Instead, they put it about halfway through. They will also have a respec system that lets you adjust your build as you need to. And so far, all of this sounds pretty great. There's even other things that will be influencing this, like your background. Yes, backgrounds are coming back. The thing that we've wanted for so long for our characters in Dragon Age, that when we had them in Origins, well, backgrounds are coming back, and they will have more than just like narrative things. It'll also impact your gameplay a bit. But the part where it gets a little bit sour for some people, myself included, is when we get to companions. And there's some sticking points with the series because while you will have some control over them, probably a bit more control than we think we do already, it's going to be less than ever before. In combat though, it sounds like you're going to essentially have their own versions of party tactics without your direct input. They will gradually get better and more competent as you grow with them. But if you're feeling particular about it, you'll also be able to directly pause and utilize companion abilities. The ability wheel looks to show the ability to command your companion's 3 abilities individually, and I believe target different enemies. It also looks like you're able to select each companion or both at the same time. Though as mentioned, you're not swapping over to them like previous DA games when you select them. You're just issuing commands. You can learn more about the companions you'll be pseudo-controlling or romancing or just being buddies with in this video right here, where I tried to go into each one, and you can kind of introduce yourselves to them. The more I've uncovered about this game, the more I've read about this game, the more I've seen about this game, the more excited I'm getting for the 4th iteration of Dragon Age. There's always going to be the potential that I will be greatly disappointed, but so far, I'm liking what I'm seeing, even if there's going to be some things that'll be a bit different, largely because every single Dragon Age has been a little bit different than the one before it.